We sent a letter which I believe has been distributed to you, to the leaders of the four caucuses, restating the Lieutenant Governor's my position on the transportation funding, and restating that $600 million for highways, roads, and bridges is essential to per year in reliable, sustainable funding in order for Minnesota to make the kind of economic and social progress which will be necessary over the next decade. Anything less than that is going to be a disservice to this state, and it's going to be a pretense to the people of Minnesota that we're taking action on something commensurate with the need when we're not. Similarly with the Metropolitan Transit, $280 million is necessary in order to both maintain the existing system as well as to undertake the expansions which are detailed in that letter. Next week, I believe the Conference Committee for Transportation will be sitting down to begin to negotiate, and this is the marker that Lieutenant Governor and I are setting for them in terms of what they have to reach to have an acceptable bill. I proposed over a year ago a means of funding this measure, and it's been criticized by some, rejected by others, in which case I'm all ears to hear what they propose as an alternative. Now, the Senate has passed legislation that would accomplish this funding need. The House is not, and so I really, again, want to impress upon the House Republican leadership the need to tell us what level of investment they're willing to support, and then how are they going to provide the resources necessary to accomplish that. Lieutenant Governor?
Thank you. So far this year, I've visited 14 communities around the state to talk about transportation, and I've talked to county commissioners and mayors and road engineers and local Chamber of Commerce members. And everywhere I have been, the message has been the same: get it done. Outside the Capitol, people know that transportation isn't a partisan issue, it is an economic development issue. And they know that our roads and bridges and transit systems are falling behind, and that if we want to be competitive in a 21st century economy, we've got to take action, and that is slowing us down that we're not. And that is a problem whether you're a farmer or a student or a manufacturing facility or just a commuter stuck in traffic. So there is violent agreement on the need for a balanced, comprehensive plan for funding our roads and bridges and transit. And we need a plan that's long-term and sustainable, and that is what the governor and I have proposed. There is consensus also outside the Capitol that Minnesota needs new revenue dedicated to transportation to make this plan happen. And the proof of this is that in counties all across the state, most counties in fact, those county commissioners have raised taxes, wheelage taxes or sales taxes, to help pay for the urgent repair needs that they see on their local roads and bridges. And remember, 90% of the roads and bridges in this state are owned and maintained by local governments. So I think there is consensus, everyone agrees and understands that if we don't fix this now, not only is it going to get worse, but it's going to cost us more money down the road to finally deal with it. So starting today, we have 24 days to pass a comprehensive transportation funding bill. And there's always going to be excuses about why we can't get it done, but I don't think that excuses are good enough. So today we ask the House to join with the governor and the Senate to work out a plan that really provides the resources we need to get our transportation system working the way it needs to work for the economic competitiveness of the state. Thank you.
Glad to respond to questions.
Can you define must? The headline on your release says you must have the $600 million for roads and bridges and $280 for transit. So if they fall short, does that mean you cannot accept it?
Well, I'm not going to prejudge what will come to us, but when I say must, I'm talking for the people of Minnesota. If they dispute this number, then let's have that discussion. But I've not had anybody say to me this is the less than this is adequate. So I'm not going to pretend that anything less than this is adequate, and I'm going to keep insisting upon an adequate bill, a bill that's sufficient. This isn't the Cadillac model. This isn't doing everything. This is doing what we must do for basic maintenance and repair, and then the expansion, some of which are listed in the letter. We could, Commissioner Zelli could elaborate on the projects we hear over and over again. People are anticipating it's going to be part of any kind of additional funding, Highway 14 and others. And if you tell people in Minnesota we're going to raise revenues from whatever source just to maintain the status quo, which is already inadequate and getting worse, I can understand the lack of enthusiasm people have. If you tell people, and this is where Commissioner Zelli has been all over the state, setting out and with maps showing what will be done over the next decade if this funding is made available, that's when people get excited, and properly so. They say, hey, there's some relief in sight. So, this is not about my getting what I want or the lieutenant governor. This is about giving Minnesota what Minnesota needs. And that's the priority. And the other point you made, Lieutenant Governor, which I'd like to point out, is the funding. If you look at that chart on the, I believe, second or third page, $240 million a year goes to local governments, which would, and you can elaborate on this, as you said, the tax measures they've taken and other measures to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue, and they too attest to the gap in their respective counties or cities, and this is a major source of additional revenue for them to do what they need to do.
As you probably know, there's a map that shows how many of the counties have raised some sort of revenue in order to help them take care of their local roads and bridges. Their challenge, however, is that after having done that, they might be raising enough revenue to pave a mile or two, repave, improve a mile or two of their roads when they've got hundreds and hundreds of miles that they have to maintain. So that's the problem that we have here. That's why they need a good partner in the state.
I go back again to your question. If we're going to have to argue for the next 3 weeks about how much money is needed for this, I'm very pessimistic that anything will be accomplished. There's too many fudge factors built in there. If we can agree at the outset, the conferees agree with our assessment that this is what's needed, then the challenge for the conferees, and we'll work with them, is how to generate those revenues. Again, adequate, sustainable, reliable. So the highway construction folks say over and over, we need to know that we have something we can rely on for the next 10 years so we can make the capital investments in new equipment and hire new crews, knowing this is going to be a sustained effort. That's what is absolutely essential component of this. But if we put our heads together at the meeting you chaired yesterday, we had county commissioners and legislators from southwestern Minnesota, and we had some other really creative ideas about sources of revenue. I mean, I'm then hopeful we can piece together a combination of revenue sources that are real dollars, that are sustainable, that are not going to eviscerate the general fund or the other geo-bonding needs. If there's a willingness to work together, I'm willing to work to achieve that goal. But if we're going to muddle around with the political shenanigans of, well, we don't really need this much money, or we'll just pretend it's going to come in a couple of years or whatever, again, frankly, prepared to say it's just not going to be achievable.
And part of that would be the transit needs, the 200.
Transit is, yes, a separate component, but also essential, yes.
But you wouldn't, I don't know if it works about, but do you have to have that much money too? Because that's obviously a big point.
Well, it's a separate source of funding, so it's the sales, our proposal is a half-cent sales tax in the 7-county metropolitan area, which will generate that amount of money. Yes, I would say that's what the metropolitan area needs, and that's what, these rural legislators who take pot shots at the Metro Transit as though it's somehow ill-founded. The economic vitality of the metropolitan region pays for the county program aid, for the local government aid, for the school aid, for a whole lot of economic redistribution that is vitally necessary for greater Minnesota, especially in more rural areas. So I just am appalled that rural legislators pound on this issue as though it's somehow a metro, greater Minnesota divide. No, we're all in this together. We all benefit. We benefit from a metro transit system which is state-of-the-art, which is how many additional people, like 2040? How many more people live in the metropolitan area?
750,000 in the next 25 years.
750,000 more people in this metropolitan area. Well, anybody who drives around during rush hour knows that we don't have a highway capacity, and even this proposal for highways, roads, and bridges doesn't generate the additional capacity for that number of people. If we can't move people to work, to recreation, if business executives can't get their employees to and from their places of employment, they're not going to stay in Minnesota. They're not going to stay in the metropolitan area. They're going to move somewhere else. We're making these investments, and we're going to lose the economic vitality that they would bring. We're going to lose the social talent that they bring, or we want to keep here. This is so crucial to the future of Minnesota, and it's just anything less than full measure is just really shortchanging the future of the state.
I thought that the Republicans roughly agreed with the number you put out, at least a $600 million number. I know they feel differently about how to pay for that number, but has that changed at all?
We're restating our position. You know, I don't have a clear indication of that. I hope we do agree. I hope we agree on this, and also agree that this is what is required to say we've done what we need to do for the future of Minnesota. And then, as I say, we can talk about how would we generate this amount of revenue.
And as far as the composition of it, is any portion of it coming from a bonding bill or from general funds? Is that unacceptable as far as?
I'm not going to rule anything out in terms of how we fund this. I think it is going to involve going to a variety of sources, and it's going to involve people taking some parts that they may not agree with, myself included, in order to get other parts that they think. So I think it's going to have to be a balance of funding sources, and that's what I think the next 3 weeks can achieve, hopefully.
I would just add that, if I could, that the one thing that is important, though, is to have a continuing source of funding, an ongoing source of funding. Anybody who knows about the business of running a big system with lots of capital improvements is that you got to know how much you're going to invest every year in order to run and operate that system as efficiently as you can. And so one-time money doesn't really help you that much. It might sound like a lot, but it doesn't really help you get where you need to go.
I wonder if either you want to comment, particularly Chairman Zelli, having run a bus company, you speak very well about this window of time in which to make the improvements necessary, and that they're going to be that much greater, that much more expensive in the subsequent years if we don't act now.
Sure, yeah, thank you very much. Well, I do come from the private sector. Asset management is something I've spent 25 years looking at, and the governor has pointed out that by undercapitalizing our system, by deferring costs, becomes extremely expensive, and every road and bridge is much like a bus or a car or a house. If you don't fix the roof, if you don't make those improvements, you're starting to have to rebuild and reconstruct whole roadways. And we've made great progress on efficiencies. We've measured them. We've actually allocated projects with the savings we've made on the work we've done. We have good materials on that, but the best thing we can do is to invest to make sure that it's more efficient in the future.
Sharon Dunning, maybe you want to elaborate on what exactly the $280 million is necessary for?
Sure.
The $280 million for the Metro Transit piece it does a number of things. It helps us build and expand on the system we have, so it's additional 20 transitways, which are high amenity, high frequency service to cover the entire metro region. And then the more important part for us is the ongoing operating dollars. Once we have a system in place, we need to have the dedicated funds that can help operate that service. And so that's where those funds are. And last thing I'll say about the Metro Ride sales tax is it will actually lead to a $50 million per year, $500 million over 10 years relief of the general fund. So those are general fund appropriations we seek every year to pay for things like metro mobility and light rail service and bus service. And those funds would then be free in the future.
Governor, may I follow up about some specific numbers? Because the House Republicans have indicated about a $600 million bonding bill, substantially less than yours. And the Speaker has said he wants a substantial portion of that for transportation. Let's say a substantial portion of that is $200 to $300 million from the bonding bill. Would you agree to that, as long as the bonding bill itself, the total number is bigger than their $600 million?
Well, I'm not going to answer hypotheticals, but I have the same confusion that or same questions that you've expressed here that I directed to the speaker yesterday at the breakfast meeting. And that's why I've urged him and urging the Senate to put their bonding bills face up on the table. I've made my bonding bill proposal specific detail 104 days ago. And there were about $4 billion in requests, 90+% of which are really good, solid projects ready to go, and I funded 1.4 billion, so less than half. And the Senate is evidently coming forward with their bill next Monday, and with those details, and I wait then for the House to do the same. And if they'll tell us in that 600 million what they're going to fund and how much of it's going for transportation, then we can have something to talk about. And we can also, all of us, stand up and tell the people of Minnesota, you know, we have our respective differences, but we're willing to stand on why we think 600 million is a better interest of the future of Minnesota than 1.4 billion. But until we get there, until all we have is, well, we got a $600 million bonding bill, but we're not going to tell you what's in it. And we want the $900 million surplus to go for taxes and transportation, but we're not going to tell you which is for which, and which is one time and which is ongoing. I mean, until we get that kind of clarity from the House leadership, we're stymied in terms of really having the real conversations that are necessary, and letting the people of Minnesota assess, is this the right leadership for the right direction for the future of Minnesota?
Governor, you laid down some markers today for the size of the money for transportation for transit. Are you also insisting on the state share for Southwest Light Rail, or is that something that's more negotiable?
Well, it is part of the money. The intention would be to use the Metro sales tax for the state share of that. It's not in my bonding bill, and I don't think it should be, because it would crowd out other essential spending there. If the critics of Southwest in particular and light rail want to kill the project, that's the way to do it. But then they also need to tell people in the metropolitan area what is your alternative. You know, we asked at my request, the Metropolitan Council looked at alternative forms of transportation if the Southwest Corridor line is not built, and there aren't any. There's not a rapid bus corridor available to replace the Southwest Corridor. So you're going to take all those people, all that ridership, and put them on the highways. Well, you talk to anybody who's trying to drive from anywhere, you know, in 494 or 394 complex, and what's the one over 35, the most congested? The one where you hung out that one day. You know,
394, 494.
I mean, to overload
35W, 494.
To overload the metropolitan area with 750,000 more people all using our highways is madness. And if we don't make these decisions now, that's what we'll have by default 10 and 20 years from now, and we'll have a congested gridlock that'll be beyond anything we have now. And people are, again, going to make decisions where they locate with their families, where they locate their businesses, where they want to work, in other places where they can get to work and from work, and where they can get their employees to and from work, and their goods, services to market. I mean, this is looking at long range. This is looking at the future of Minnesota 10 and 20 years from now. But we have to face up to it.
Governor, when we talked to the speaker yesterday about this, he was adamant again about he firmly believes that Minnesotans are on their side, his side, in not wanting to raise the gas tax. In your mind and in your analysis, is there a way of achieving these markers, these goals of yours, without a gas tax?
Well, the speaker is always what he's against. And I'm waiting for him, if he's the Speaker of the House, and they're in the majority, it's his responsibility and his caucus's responsibility to tell us what they're for. And if they're for $600 million a year for each of the next 10 years for transportation, for highways, roads, and bridges, then it's their responsibility, and they're against the gas tax, and it's their responsibility to tell us how they would fund that. And that's what I'm waiting for. So we just keep, pounding the political drum, we're against the gas tax. I think most Minnesotans are against the gas tax because they don't want to pay more taxes. But you say, are you willing to pay more, whatever, 5-10 cents more, in order to have the the program that we've detailed here for the future, or would you rather things get worse in your respective communities? And that's what we hear over and over. You've heard from county commissioners and others who are not political and are not partisan, saying we have to have this out there for our economic vitality and for our citizens. So if you say, well, yeah, but you don't have to pay for it in any real way, hey, hallelujah. But the money's got to come from somewhere. And you know, again, if it's not the gas tax, I'm open to other suggestions or other alternatives, but I want to find out what they are.
Governor, they did pass a bill last year.
I just wanted to repeat something that a county commissioner from the Mankato area said to me a week or two ago. He said, Tina, it's a cup of coffee a week in order to fix our roads and bridges. And, you know, that's why I think 16 other states around the country have actually raised revenue in order to fix their roads and bridges and transit. 8 of them run by Republicans. So that's why we think this isn't a partisan issue. And if people say a cup of coffee a week to fix that, you know, Highway 14 in the southern part of the state, or Highway 23, or 371, or 212, it's worth it.
The Republicans did pass a bill last year. What is your critique of that, and is there anything in there that you can live with?
So, what's the source of? I go back again. What is their source of funding?
Tax on auto parts and so forth.
Well, that gets us a fraction away, and that might be part of it. How much is that the tax on auto sales?
About 250
per year.
billion per year.
Per year. So that's 500 million out of the per biennium out of the general fund. You know, we have to look at the consequence of that for especially the next biennium and beyond in terms of the fiscal integrity of the general fund. I mean, Speaker Dowd said it a couple weeks ago to some group, but it was recorded that he's in favor of diverting money permanently from the general fund to transportation so he can shrink the general fund so there'll be less money for education and all the other needs funded through the general fund. These things are trade-offs. And there's $900 million surplus, so you could pay for the first year of what we propose here. But if you put $600 million from the general fund into transportation, then next year that's $1.2 billion. That already has the general fund in deficit and leaves no room for anything else. So I mean, you know, that's why again you talk in these generalities. It's not the real world. We're at that point in this legislative session where we need to get real, and everybody else does too. If they want to divert money from the general fund, that certainly that's fair game to put on the table. But again, you know, we have to face up to the real consequences of that now in the next years. But I don't rule anything out. I'm again willing to consider anything and everything, and I think that's what the Commerce Committee needs to do, and see what's possible.
Have you done anything besides the letter and talking to us, which we appreciate, but have you done anything like inviting the speaker and majority leader here together, or bringing both transportation chairs?
I've had more meetings and visits and gatherings with legislators of both parties than all of the other years combined. And I took to heart the criticism that I wasn't doing enough of that outreach. And we met with Representative Kelly just last week. We met with the leadership. We meet regularly with the GOP leadership and then the DFL leadership. We met with the conference committee. I'll meet with anybody who wants to meet with me to try to move these things forward.
But you haven't invited them together to talk with like three.
Watch the Wild Pile game or watch the Twins? No, I'm not. I don't know that was, you know, if we could find a team that would actually be winning. You know, oops. Then it might be more suspicious. Yeah. I can enumerate all the meetings I've had and conversations, and if they're more, and I'm available the next 3 weeks. I've basically cleared my calendar of outside engagement so I can, and anything leaving St. Paul so I can be available. I'm totally available. Anybody who wants to sit down and talk, one-on-one, two-on-one, whatever, I'm available. We have another meeting today with, we invited County Commissioner. Oh, you've been putting this together.
We've been gathering together with county commissioners and local legislators just to have a locally based conversation about transportation. And that's what the governor is referring to. We're going to do one of those again this afternoon. We did one yesterday, and we have at least another one scheduled next week.
Any votes for a gas tax in the Republican caucus?
Kind of hard to tell right now.
And again, if they want to rule it out, just tell us what you're ruling in. And tell us what the consequences of that are for other parts of the budget, where the money's coming from. I take no joy in a gas tax for any, purpose other than generating revenue that's going to be sustained over here, and also has the advantage it's a user tax. So all the people who drive through Minnesota from other states who stop to refuel contribute to the Highway Trust Fund. So it has those kinds of advantages. But I have no desire to raise anybody's taxes unless it's an essential part of getting something done. But if you don't raise the gas tax and you don't provide any other real money from anywhere else, and things get worse over the next 2.5 years I'm here, and the next 4 years that somebody else is here, I'll tell you, in a decade, this state's go back and you can document. You can say, well, that old Mark Dayton, I vaguely remember him, but he told us today that if we don't do this, things are going to get worse. The highway system is going to get more deteriorated, more dilapidated. There are going to be more accidents. There are going to be more potholes. There are going to be more congestion. It's going to take longer for people to get to and from work. And in greater Minnesota, all the manufacturing out there is going to have a harder time getting their products to market. And I want my responsibility and the legislature's responsibility is to take action now, so that's not going to happen.
Governor, just to make sure I understand, earlier you said that if we have to debate the figures, that you're pessimistic that action will be taken this year, and there were similar remarks in the House Wednesday. So could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, just so make sure
What were the similar remarks?
that, I forgot which representative, but they said that they don't believe the tax bill or transportation bill will be passed this year.
We'll have a bill. And it takes 202 to tango.
Anything else on this topic? Okay, thank you.
Include the lieutenant governor, she tangos better than I do. So. Takes 203 to tango.
Can you give us some examples?
I think somebody has it in the archives. I saw it on, I think Almanac has somewhere, me tangoing with then Mayor Senator Shells Belton in 2000, waiting for the vice president to finish meeting the Saturday before the election with, who's the lieutenant governor back then?
Carol Molnau?
No, this is back under Ventura.
Ray Shunk?
Yeah, Mayshunk. And about 100 of people who were supporting Al Gore were standing on the cold October night in downtown Minneapolis. And we heard that he was at the airport trying to recruit Mayshunk, thinking that was going to help him with the independent vote. And the air out of the Al Gore for President balloon, you could just feel it just. So to stay warm and provide entertainment, Sharon Sells Belton and I started. That's the last. I hope it's the last documented version of my bebopping.
But if we get a transportation bill, we can all dance together, so it'll be good.
There you go.
Is that a promise?
Or a threat.
All right. Any questions? Thank you. Any questions? Anything else?
Well, Governor, the Democrats in the Senate are going to roll out their bonding bill, looks like on Monday. What are you hoping for?
I'm hoping it's in the neighborhood of what I proposed, 1.4 billion, and I'm hoping that we have broad agreement. But of course, they have their own priorities, and they're both committees in the House and the Senate spent a lot of time during the interim traveling around and looking directly at various projects, and I really respect both of them for doing so. So we'll see what we have, and there's then that negotiation process can and will begin if and when the House puts this bill forward. That bill has to pass both bodies before it goes to conference. So, and again, if the House will put their bill forward, and we'll have something specific to talk about.
Do you have any fear with all this tangling over transportation that there might not be a bonding bill this year?
Well, Representative Torkelson said on Almanac this week that it's the dessert at the end of the meal. So sort of like, well, eat your spinach and your turnips, and then you get to bonding. I asked the speaker for clarification on that, and didn't get. I don't know if that means they're going to hold back on bonding until these other measures. But again, the longer they obfuscate the process, the more difficult it's going to be to resolve our differences.
What are the political implications if there's not a bonding bill in the fall elections?
Well, if those who don't want a bonding bill can make their own calculation of that. I look at, again, what's for Minnesota. You know, the MnSCU and the University of Minnesota could take $600 million between the two of them and spend that money wisely, about 100 to 125 million just for basic upkeep and repairs, just to keep their buildings from getting worse, deteriorating. And then you got the University of Minnesota's projects and MnSCU projects around the state for additions to their campuses to improve the quality of education. So we can attract and retain the best and brightest in our education system and prepare them for the jobs of the future. I mean, not to make these investments is so unwise and so destructive to the future of a better Minnesota. So with the politics of it, everybody makes their own calculation on that. I'm not running November. I can focus my attention on what I believe in my core, and from 40 years of experience is in the best interest of Minnesota, and that's what I'm focused on.
Have you been briefed on the drug sentencing agreement?
That agreement. I've been briefed on it. I don't know every detail. I think if there's the kind of agreement, if they've been able to reach the kind of agreement that those different groups that are involved in that can achieve, I'll sign that bill.
That House passed a big budget bill last night with some of the very provisions that you warned them not to pass regarding abortion and so forth. What will be the result if that's something like that
Won't be a bill.
passed?
Won't be a bill. I'm not going to get involved in negotiating and compromising and deciding we're going to swallow this one in order to get, then no bill. And there's no funding for education, and there's no funding. The one, I go back again, and I will elaborate on this next week to them. If they can't agree on something, then send me a clean bill, a budget bill, with what we need to operate the state security hospitals and our prison facilities. And not because I think that's the only thing we should fund, but that's because without that, the public safety is going to be put at risk, and the safety of the people who work in those institutions, and the safety of people who reside in them. And that's the one where I'm going to urge them, if they can't agree on, if they're going to load all these bills with all this other garbage for political purposes, just at least send them that. At least send me a clean bill on those items. And if you're going to, we're going to have to sacrifice broadband and early childhood education and operating funds for MnSCU and the university, and you want to cause all that damage to everything else because of your political charades, then you are responsible for that failure. But I'm not going to, I'm just sending, when we get the details, I'll send the conferees a letter and just tell them what's not even, can't even be on the table. I'm not going to waste anybody's time, and if that's their attitude, they should pass the bonding bill and transportation bill and go home, save the taxpayers the money.
Okay. Governor, when do you expect the cone of silence talks to start up?
First of all, I agree with the Purple legislative group. Let's get these bills to me with a week to spare, so that if I'm going to, not be able to accept something, there's time for them to go back and get it right. But I don't intend to go into that kind of cone of silence for 5 days and come out of it with a backroom deal that didn't involve me. I learned that lesson last year. And we don't need to do that this time because these are, budget items that are important, but it's not like last time where we had whole parts of state government that would shut down if we didn't get a biennial bill. So it's a very, very different situation. And so I can't say there won't be one, but I don't anticipate one. And frankly, there's nothing that I feel the need to have any cone of silence about. I think this stuff should be on the table. I think everybody should be aware of what's going on, and I think all parties involved should put their cards on the table. I come in the House for passing a bill. Doesn't have any money in it. It has a lot of, as I said, political pandering, but at least they put it on the table with what it is, so we have something to deal with. And we're at the point now, and certainly next week with the bonding, I hope the House will also put its bonding bill forward. Transportation, where we can start getting down to real decisions if they're possible.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.